India doesn't have the capacity to build world-class infrastructure. A McKinsey report concluded this in 2017, but right now India is doing something the world told it was impossible. By the time you finish watching, you'll understand why betting against India might be the most expensive mistake global investors make this decade. This video covers the most ambitious infrastructure and technology projects India is executing right now. Project 1. A port built on land that does not exist. Vadhvan is India's most ambitious maritime infrastructure project, an $8 billion deepwater port that will be constructed on 1,448 hectares of land that currently does not even exist. Every berth, every terminal, every road, every railway line, all of it will sit on artificial land reclaimed from the Arabian Sea. The deep water at Vadhvan that makes the location commercially valuable sits offshore, not adjacent to usable land. India's solution is to create the land. 200 million cubic meters of reclamation material, nearly 3 times what the Suez Canal expansion required, not to dig a channel but to build an island. When complete, Vadhvan will be one of the 10 largest ports on Earth. It connects directly to the Delhi-Mumbai dedicated freight corridor 12 kilometers away. It anchors the India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor, India's answer to China's Belt and Road Initiative. And it does something that no Indian port has ever done: gives the world's largest ships a home port in India. Project 2. The project China does not want built. Galathea Bay represents India's most strategically significant maritime infrastructure project in history. The port sits on Great Nicobar Island at the far southern edge of the Andaman and Nicobar chain, 40 nautical miles from the Strait of Malacca, the most critical maritime choke point in the world. Nearly a third of global maritime trade passes through this strait. 80% of China's oil imports pass through it. The country that has a permanent, capable presence at the entrance to this strait has leverage over the most consequential maritime corridor on Earth. India is building that presence. The Galathea Bay International Container Transshipment Port received final PPP approval in March 2026, with an appraised project cost of approximately 48,862 Karwar rupees. Designed for 16 million containers per year across 4 construction phases. Equidistant from Colombo, Port Klang, and Singapore, positioned to capture cargo from the world's busiest shipping route that currently bypasses India entirely. But Galathea Bay is more than a port. It is part of a $10 billion development of Great Nicobar Island that includes an airport, a power plant, a township, and, critically, naval and coast guard infrastructure. India has explicitly excluded all foreign operators from this project. It is entirely under Indian control. The commercial geography and the strategic geography point in exactly the same direction. A permanent Indian footprint at the western entrance to Asia's most important sea lane. Project 3. The 50-year dream India is finally building. Kalpasar is one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects ever proposed by any country, a 60-kilometer dam across the Gulf of Khambat in Gujarat. When complete, it will trap the fresh water that the Narmada, Mahi, Sabarmati, and Dadar rivers currently empty into the sea. Over time, that trapped fresh water will push out the salt water, creating a reservoir approximately 2,000 square kilometers in area, holding nearly 8 billion cubic meters of water, the largest freshwater reservoir on Earth. That water would irrigate over 1 million hectares of farmland, supply drinking water to drought-prone Saurashtra, and in some versions of the plan generate renewable energy and carry a road link that cuts the travel distance from Saurashtra to South Gujarat from 240 kilometers to 60. The Gulf of Khambat is one of the most difficult places on Earth to build anything. The Gulf is funnel-shaped. As the ocean pushes into the narrowing Gulf, the water has nowhere to go but up, producing a tidal range of up to 11 meters. Most coastlines experience tidal ranges of 1 to 3 meters. The forces on Kalpasar's dam would be several times more powerful than almost any marine structure ever built. The tides generate ferocious currents twice a day, carrying massive loads of silt, and the Gulf sits in a seismically active zone. The foundations of a 60-kilometer dam would need to survive earthquakes while resting on constantly shifting marine sediment. For 50 years, this combination kept Kalpasar on paper. Then in May 2026, during Prime Minister Modi's visit to the Netherlands, India signed a letter of intent for technical cooperation on the project with the Dutch government. Gujarat formally sought environmental clearance in May 2026, listing a cost of 1.33 lakh crore rupees, approximately $14 billion. In a world where China controls the headwaters of rivers feeding India's north, Kalpasar offers something different, a self-contained freshwater reserve entirely within Indian territory, immune to upstream manipulation, holding enough water to transform the agricultural future of an entire region. Project 4, the launch that put India in a three-country club. Skyroot Aerospace, founded in Hyderabad in 2018 by two former ISRO scientists, was started with an idea that, at the time, was genuinely radical for India. That a private Indian company could design, build, and launch an orbital rocket without being a government program and without the institutional infrastructure of ISRO. 6 years later, that rocket was on the pad, and 8 years after the company's founding, it was in orbit. Vikram 1, the orbital launch vehicle that Skyroot built, lifted off on mission Andaman on July 18, 2026, carrying payloads including a satellite for German company Deepwater, a lab-grown diamond from an Indian company called Cosmos Diamonds, and a miniature 18-karat gold rocket made by artisans in Telangana. 17 minutes after liftoff, it was in a 450-kilometer orbit. India was the third country with private orbital launch capability. The policy that made this possible was India's 2020 decision to open the space sector to private participation. 6 years after that policy change, a private Indian company reached orbit. The Indian space economy is currently approximately $8.4 billion. The target is $44 billion by 2033. Vikram 1's flight on July 18, 2026 was the clearest signal yet that India intends to get there. In space, the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center was created in 2020 as the single-window regulatory authority for the private space sector. Before InSpace, a private Indian company wishing to build a rocket or a satellite had to navigate a bureaucratic maze that had no clear pathway to approval. After InSpace, the pathway was explicit, the timelines were defined, and the answer could be yes rather than an indefinite maybe. 47 space startups have now received InSpace approvals. The venture capital fund of 1,000 crore rupees dedicated to space startups, approved in October 2024, provides early-stage capital that the market alone would not have supplied quickly enough. The 2023 space policy formally assigns ISRO a different role: advanced research, new launch and spacecraft systems, and the human spaceflight program, while transitioning mature systems and routine commercial services to private industry. India's Gaganyaan program, India's first crewed spaceflight, is the next milestone in the government-led side of this equation. The mission will carry Indian astronauts to orbit, making India the fourth country to independently send humans to space. The Department of Space's 2026-27 budget of 13,705 crore rupees, with capital expenditure rising over 1,000 crore from the previous year, signals that Gaganyaan is moving from preparation into hardware realization. The Skyroot launch proved India can orbit privately. Gaganyaan will prove India can orbit its own people. Project 5, the port that just changed everything. For decades, approximately 75% of India's transshipment cargo left the country to be handled at foreign ports. Ships carrying Indian goods could not dock at Indian ports as they were too shallow, too small, too far from the main shipping lanes. They went to Colombo, to Singapore, to Dubai, and India paid billions every year for the privilege of using someone else's ports to move its own exports. Vizhinjam, inaugurated in May 2025 on Kerala's southern tip, is the answer India spent 15 years building. Vizhinjam Port and Vadhvan Port are both massive deepwater port projects, differing in location, scale, and strategic purpose. Vizhinjam's natural advantage is extraordinary. 24 meters of water depth just off the coast, deep enough for the largest container ships on Earth without dredging, without artificial deepening, without any modification to the seabed, just 10 nautical miles from the shipping corridor that carries 30% of global maritime trade. Within 18 months of opening, Vizhinjam handled 2 million containers, the fastest any Indian port has ever reached that milestone. In May 2026 alone, it processed over 130,000 containers, a new record. The world's largest container ships, which had never docked on India's coastline in their history, are now routing through Kerala as a matter of commercial logic. MSC, the world's largest shipping company, signed a $1.5 billion agreement for a major stake in the port. This is not just a port, it is proof of concept. India proved that it can build and operate a deepwater transshipment facility that the world's largest shipping companies find commercially competitive. Project 6, the depth India is about to conquer. Matsya 6000 is a fourth-generation manned deep ocean submersible being developed by the National Institute of Ocean Technology in Chennai under India's Deep Ocean Mission. Its name means fish in Sanskrit. Its mission is to carry 3 human beings to a depth of 6,000 meters, roughly 6 kilometers below the surface of the ocean, to explore the deep seabed for mineral resources, marine biodiversity, and scientific data that is only accessible to countries with the technology to reach that depth. Only 5 countries in the world have successfully sent human beings to depths of 6,000 meters or more: the United States, Russia, Japan, France, and China. India is building the technology to become the 6th. The submersible is constructed from 80mm thick titanium alloy, the only material with the combination of strength, weight, and corrosion resistance required to withstand the pressure at that depth, which is approximately 600 times atmospheric pressure at the surface. The human capsule has an operational endurance of 12 to 16 hours and an emergency endurance of 96 hours. The program is progressing in stages. Matsya 6000 completed wet testing at Chennai Harbor in early 2025. Shallow water demonstrations at depths up to 500 meters are scheduled for mid-2026. Final unmanned deep-sea tests follow in 2026. The first manned dive to the full 6,000 meters is scheduled for December 2027. Indian aquanauts are already preparing. Commander J.P. Singh, a former Indian Navy officer, became the first Indian to dive to 5,000 meters when NIOT scientists conducted training dives in the North Atlantic aboard a French submersible. The people going down are ready, the vessel is being built, and the ocean is waiting. Project 7, the port on someone else's soil. On July 7, 2026, during Prime Minister Modi's state visit to Jakarta, India and Indonesia signed an agreement to jointly develop Sabang Port on Wei Island, off the northern tip of Sumatra. The significance of this agreement is geographical before it is commercial. Sabang sits on the western shore of the Strait of Malacca, approximately 160 kilometers from India's Galathea Bay project on the eastern shore. India now has presence on both sides of the passage, through which a third of global trade flows. Sabang has an extraordinary location and a history of failing to realize it. Declared a free trade zone under Dutch colonial administration in 1896, revived twice more by independent Indonesia, the port has repeatedly attracted attention without attracting the investment its position would seem to guarantee. What it had not had until now was a committed partner with a specific strategic reason to develop it. India has that reason. The project cleared India's National Green Tribunal in February 2026 and carries an estimated price tag close to $9 billion. Its first phase is targeted for completion by 2028. The agreement covers commercial port development, logistics infrastructure, bunkering services, and, this is the part that China is watching closely, allows for joint maritime patrols and naval coordination. Sabang gives the Indian Navy a sovereign-backed platform to monitor Chinese naval movements entering the Indian Ocean, without the cost or political weight of full sovereignty over Indonesian territory. Together, Vizhinjam, Vadhvan, Galathea Bay, and Sabang constitute a maritime transformation of a scale India has never attempted. In a single decade, India is moving from a country that paid Colombo, Singapore, and Dubai to handle its own cargo to a country with commercial and strategic presence at every critical node of Indian Ocean maritime geography. The map of the Indian Ocean is being redrawn, and India is holding the pen. Project 8, India's bet on high-speed rail. The Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail corridor is 508 kilometers of track, 12 stations, 320 kilometers per hour design speed, and the single most complex railway project India has ever attempted. It will cut the journey time between Mumbai and Ahmedabad from approximately 9 hours to 2 hours and 7 minutes. Construction began in April 2021. As of mid-2026, 352 kilometers of viaduct construction are complete. 446 kilometers of pier work are done. 193 route kilometers of reinforced concrete track bed have been laid. Noise barriers have been installed over 291 kilometers of elevated sections. 7 mountain tunnels and 1 undersea tunnel, India's first underwater railway tunnel, connecting Virar and Boisar in Maharashtra, are either complete or in active excavation. The first section to open will be the 50-kilometer stretch between Surat and Bilimora in Gujarat, targeted for August 15, 2027. The Thane-Ahmedabad section follows in 2028. The full 508-kilometer corridor opens in 2029. The trains themselves will run on Japanese Shinkansen technology, the E10 model, alongside an Indian-built train set that BEML is developing for domestic production, targeted for its first run in 2027. The bullet train is not simply a faster way to travel between two cities. It is India's entry into high-speed rail technology. The engineering capability, the regulatory framework, the construction expertise, the supply chain that will be applied to the 2 additional corridors sanctioned in the 2026 budget, Mumbai-Pune and Pune-Hyderabad. The people building India's first bullet train are building the capability to build all the ones that follow. Project 9, India's first semiconductor fab. In February 2026, Prime Minister Modi inaugurated Micron Technology's semiconductor assembly and test facility in Sanand, Gujarat, the first operational semiconductor facility built during the current program, a $2.75 billion investment by the largest American memory chip maker. A few kilometers away, a far more significant facility is under construction. The Tata Electronics PSMC Semiconductor Fab in Dholera is the centerpiece of India's semiconductor mission. A greenfield fabrication facility, designed, built, and equipped to produce silicon wafers from scratch, representing a total investment of 91,000 crore rupees, approximately $11 billion. The central government is contributing 50% of capital expenditure. Taiwan's Powerchip Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation is providing the technology and engineering support. Tata Electronics is building it. The facility is designed for 28 nanometer and above process nodes, not cutting-edge sub-5 nanometer chips for the most advanced AI applications, but the mature to advanced range that covers the overwhelming majority of what modern economies actually need. Automotive chips, industrial microcontrollers, display drivers, power management integrated circuits, IoT devices. The range that is currently almost entirely manufactured in Taiwan and China and represents one of the most significant supply chain vulnerabilities in the global economy. At full capacity, 50,000 wafer starts per month. First silicon, the first wafers produced on the production line, is targeted for December 2026, per Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw's confirmed timeline. India's semiconductor market was approximately $38 billion in 2023. It is projected to reach $100 to $110 billion by 2030. India is building the domestic manufacturing capacity to serve it before the decade turns. The question is why all of this is happening at the same time. The answer is not coincidence. India's infrastructure deficit, the gap between what the country needs and what it had, has been described and debated for decades. The reasons were land acquisition disputes, environmental clearance delays, inter-ministry coordination failures, financing constraints, and political risk. The National Infrastructure Pipeline, which identified 6,000 projects for accelerated execution, PM Gati Shakti, which created a digital mapping and planning platform that allows ministries to coordinate infrastructure projects without the interagency friction that had historically delayed them. The production-linked incentive schemes that made India commercially attractive for global manufacturers looking to diversify out of China. The semiconductor mission, the space sector reform, the ports program, Each one a deliberate policy choice backed by capital allocation and regulatory execution. The projects in this video represent different aspects of the same fundamental shift. India deciding that it is not waiting for permission to build the infrastructure of a first-world economy. The dam across the sea was proposed in 1975. The semiconductor fab was proposed after 2008's global chip shortage. The bullet train was sanctioned in 2015. Different timelines, different sectors, different ministries, different technologies, but the same underlying truth. India is building things the world has not seen before, and it is building them now. If this gave you something to think about, share it with someone who still thinks differently. Like, subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.